Good afternoon, everybody. So our next session is starting right now, and please uh, allow me to invite Professor Gagandeep Kang. Welcome, ma'am. Professor Gagandeep Kang is a very well-known name in Indian science, a very famous science leader and an inspiration for millions of Indians. She's a clinical scientist and professor in the Department of Gastrointestinal Sciences at Christian Medical College, Vellore, and currently the executive director of the Translational Health Science and Technology Institute, that is THSTI, Faridabad. Professor Kang is the first Indian woman in the history of India to become the fellow of the prestigious Royal Society of London. And yes, so that is really a great achievement. To become the FRS, it's really difficult. Yes, and of course, so many awards, including the Infosys Prizes in 2016, and published well over 300 papers, and on editorial board of several prestigious journals. And Professor Kang is also very well known and in her contributions on fighting COVID-19 in the country. As an advisor in the Christian Medical College, she had advising on government as well as Indian state Indian union government on the various policies as well. And she has played a wonderful job. Recently, she came in news as well to remove the the panic associated with the COVID-19 as well. So I'm really humbled to have you here, ma'am. And I also would like to welcome Dr. Punita Pandey. Dr. Punita Pandey is also a young science leader. Over to you, ma'am.
Yeah. Hello, ma'am. It's really an honor to have you here. We are very happy to listen to you today. And I'm sure all the participants as well as the students that are listening to you, they'll be greatly benefited from your lecture today, ma'am. So let's begin your lecture today. Yeah.
Thank you, Punita. Thank you, Felix, for inviting me to speak here today. When Felix sent the list of topics for discussion, I thought I'd take something that I am particularly interested in, and that's mentoring. So I just wanted to talk to you a bit about mentoring. And then as Felix asked, he asked me to provide a little bit of a personal story. So I will do that as well and then take questions. So
sure.
Thank you, Punita. So are you able to see my slides now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So mentoring actually is named after Mentor, who was a friend of Ulysses or Odysseus, depending on whether you use the Greek or the Latin term. In the pre-Christian era, it was very common for wars to last for a very long time. So when Ulysses knew that he was going to fight the Trojans, he realized he would be leaving his son behind. So he asked his friend to make sure that his son Telemachus was looked after. So the term mentoring really comes from the name of Ulysses's friend. So what really is mentoring? I think sometimes people are unclear about what is mentoring and what is coaching. So we need to be very clear about the differences between the two. Mentoring is a professional partnership where someone who is senior, more experienced, called the mentor, assists a younger, more junior, less experienced person, the mentee, in developing specific skills and knowledge. And the idea here is to advance professional, personal, and career growth. And usually this means that the person who is mentoring is not directly the line manager of the mentee. So there is a certain degree of independence to that. Now, in coaching, which is a more professional relationship, mentors give advice, but it's not necessary for the mentee to follow that. In coaching, the acting on the advice is expected. In the case of mentoring, it's not. So if you are to look at coaching or mentoring again, coaching is to make a person achieve their maximal personal and professional potential. So you have to ask for someone to coach you. In mentoring, it is usually someone who is a bit ahead of you in a career path, who acts as an advisor, provides support, provides feedback. And this mentoring process can be formal or it can be informal. In a formal mentoring program, this is usually something that institutions have in place, where the institution says, you know, this person is going to be your mentor. You have to have so many meetings with them. This is their role. This is their responsibility. And you have to make sure that this is adhered to. In informal mentoring, the choice is left very much to the mentor and the mentee. And this can be, timings can be variable, the level of activity can be very variable. Both work, but for different people and for different institutions, the approaches that are taken can differ a lot. Of course, in some Indian institutions, we have no mentoring whatsoever. Or if you're really lucky, you get some informal mentoring. So I think one of the things to understand about mentoring is that for building an ecosystem, the idea of rapid progression in your career through the advice of a senior person is absolutely essential. And this is not something that we have really had a focus on in India. In fact, it's been much the other way around, where people worry that senior people don't want juniors to get ahead very easily. So it's a rare senior who will provide the kind of support that juniors need. But I think mentoring is one way where you build communities. And if you look at the more advanced academic systems in the West, mentoring is a key responsibility within the academic infrastructure. Now, when you look at mentoring, this is usually a time-limited contract during a certain period during a person's career. So, for example, in the field that I come from, in clinical medicine, for example, you would have people who are your professional guides who are in the same subject as you, but you might have a mentor from a different department, somebody that you can talk to during the time that you're doing 3 years of a postgraduate course. So it's time limited, it is confidential, and it usually occurs one-on-one. There are group mentoring activities as well, but it's more common to have one-on-one interactions. This can involve guidance, giving advice, help in making contacts. This is how networks are built, sharing experience, providing support, and to some extent, including coaching skills. Now, what does a mentor really need to know and learn? You can't start out by being a mentor as soon as you become a professor, for example. The idea of listening actively, you need to understand as a mentor that your responsibility is to bring the other person up. They may not be very confident. They've come into a new job. It is a new environment. What is it that you can do to listen to them, to hear what they are saying, both in words, but also from their body language, and think about what you can do to support them. Now, for a mentor, to listen, to support is very important, but none of this is going to happen if there isn't a relationship of trust between the mentor and the mentee. So understanding what it takes to build trust, to be reliable, is something that mentors need to understand. You can be a very, very busy professor, have no time at all, but if you've made a commitment to your mentee, then you have to be there for them. That commitment should take priority. You also need to know that the goals that are set need to be the mentee's goals, that the mentor doesn't decide, oh, you should achieve this. You could provide advice, you could provide support, but the goal has to be something that is set by the mentee after discussion with the mentor. And the idea is to now look at building all the skills that are required to achieve the goals, building the networks that are required to achieve the goals. The idea of a mentor is to encourage, to inspire, and to support. Now, what does the mentor have to do? The mentor's role is a hugely important one, and not everyone makes a good mentor. There are questions that mentors should ask themselves before they start becoming mentors. What are the experiences and learning that I can bring to the mentoring relationships? What are my expectations for the relationships? This is not on the part of the mentor something that makes their own careers grow. And that's why it's also very important to ask the third question: are there any obstacles that could impede the relationship's development? So once a mentor is convinced that they do have something to offer, that they do not have unrealistic expectations, and they've thought about what problems there might be, then the role of the mentor is to make sure that support is provided. The development of collaborations can happen, may not necessarily be there, but it's very important to be available. When you make an appointment, it should be kept. If you have made a commitment, you have to be very reliably responsive to the mentee. Now, it's important to encourage and inspire. So therefore, being a role model is important. And frequently, mentees will observe the mentor in the performance of their duties. But it's important also to remember that your mentee may not be exactly like you. So therefore, you do have to respect the other person's individuality. What about the mentee or the trainee? I think it's very important to be honest about strengths and limitations. You know yourself, and to have an, a view that you can achieve anything at a junior level is unrealistic. So you need to avoid those unrealistic expectations of yourself, but also unrealistic expectations of your mentor. To think that they are going to be able to transform your career can only happen if you and the mentor really work together and have decided what are achievable goals. Trainees or mentees do need to be ambitious, need to set high standards for themselves. But it's also important to realize that this is a phase of growth for your career. So therefore, you don't start out knowing everything, and it's important to do whatever is required to learn all you can. Now, if you look at the stages of mentoring and the activities, it's 4 stages: building the relationship, exchanging information and setting goals, working towards the goals, and then ending the formal mentoring relationship and planning for the future. In order to do this, it's very important to make sure that you have clear expectations, you have outlined what this contract is between the mentor and the mentee, how frequently will you be meeting, are personal issues going to be discussed or not? Some relationships that's accepted, in others it isn't. Do you want didactic mentoring? Some people do, others don't. Observing the mentor in their duties and conducting research, in conducting meetings, in interacting with co-researchers, all of these are really important. in order for younger people to understand how they need to be thinking about their own engagement with others and their own responsibilities. Now, mentoring has a lot of value, but doesn't always work out. Sometimes you have very senior people who take on the role of mentorship and then don't deliver on it, or they think their job is to order people around, tell younger people what they should or shouldn't be doing, and expect that they will live up to their expectations. Now, that doesn't work for everybody, and it can be very, very challenging if these kinds of conflicts arise. You also have mentors who make promises and don't deliver, and this can be hurtful and demeaning to a mentee. There are also personality issues, particularly for women. Gender issues do come up, and sometimes it can be hard to find the kind of mentor who fits your requirements for mentoring. Now, there can be conflicts also because the motivation of both the mentee and the mentor might not be aligned, and the value that each of them sees may be very, very different. So if those happen, then it is probably a better idea to think about whether a different approach to mentoring is needed on either side. There are also ethical and legal issues. The first thing in medicine and in mentoring is do no harm. The idea of mentoring is to promote the well-being and the welfare of the mentee. So it's important that these are not abused. It's important that mentors do not misguide their mentees, and obviously exploitation is to be avoided. Sometimes quite difficult in the Indian scenario. And then confidentiality and privacy, particularly because your mentor is not your line manager, and you may have problems with your line manager that need to be sorted out. These are the kinds of issues that would be discussed with the mentor, and the mentor must maintain confidentiality for these. Especially for women, it has been shown that they receive very, very little mentoring, but when they do get experienced, well-connected mentors who are committed to advancing their careers, then the amount of retention within the academic environment, the increase in productivity, really optimizes the potential for women to do better. So I think mentoring is important for all young people, but especially for women. This is something that we should be thinking about instituting formally. It's hard to find currently, but I think the pull for this must come from young people, and they must demand that there should be such formal arrangements. Now, if you look at success and failure of mentoring, successful mentoring relationships are characterized by reciprocity, mutual respect, clear expectations, connections, and shared values. And failed relationships are when communication and commitment are not there, when there are differences in personality, when there are differences in interests, when there is competition between mentor and mentee, and sometimes when there is a lack of experience in the mentoring process. So moving from that, I've never had a formal mentor. So this is my personal story of informal interactions and mentoring. Now, My father was in the railways, so I lived in a lot of places. You can see from the stars on the map the many places that I went to school. And my mother was a teacher, and what she taught us was logistics, how to be organized about everything, how to have multiple responsibilities and still be able to handle them in a time frame that is responsive to the need. And that has stood me in really good stead through my entire life. My father taught me that if you want answers, and either look in books, because you will always find a lot of information there. And if you can't find the answer in a book, you can think about experiments that will help you to find those answers. So in terms of schooling, it isn't classical to call your parents mentors, but I think some of the things that I learned from them were absolutely essential to whatever I have done in life. So then if you look at medical school, it's always challenging to get in. And I think in terms of mentoring, usually people think that finding academic mentors happens when you're in college. And shown here is Dr. Alka Ganesh, who was a young professor of medicine when my classmates and I joined. And she was remarkable in how she carried herself and how she taught all of us. Very sensible, the kind of person who said, you do not need to do unnecessary investigations. Show us how you make a diagnosis with the minimal level of investigations. Really good histories, really good physical examinations. Come up with what is a rational approach to making a diagnosis and deciding on treatment. She's one example of the many, many people in CMC who followed this approach and showed us that it is possible to effectively deliver care without having every expensive tool in the book. So there were many things that I learned, and you learn with friends, you learn from teachers, you learn in a variety of different ways when you're a young person in college. And I can't emphasize enough that it isn't just curricular learning that is important. Extracurricular learning is equally important in understanding how to deal with people and how to think about your role as part of the community. So we did a lot of plays, we went on a lot of picnics, and I think that taught me as much as my classes did. So having balance in your life is really important. So when I was doing my MBBS, I kept thinking about an MD and what, and it was as varied from eye surgery to psychiatry, and I wound up in microbiology, which actually I didn't like very much in the way it's practiced in medical schools. So I thought research and what my father had taught me about experimentation was important. So I moved into that. In my early career, I had a number of people who were really important. Professor Jacob John was the head of the department when I was doing my MD. And then subsequently, I joined the Department of Gastrointestinal Sciences, where Professor V.I. Mathan and Professor Mini Mathan were the heads of department. And what I learned from them was really about how challenging it can be to be a junior when your seniors are very, very well recognized individuals, because they are very, very busy and they rarely have time for the juniors in the department. So perhaps it was a good thing that they were that busy, because what it gave me was a lot of independence and the need to learn as much as possible on my own. So learning from them, watching them in meetings, looking at how they handled their relationships for international collaborations were also really valuable for me. But then I had the opportunity to go to the UK and then to the US. And during that time, which was my postdoc, I met my first proper mentor. This was Professor Mary Estes, and she was at the Baylor, she still is at the Baylor College of Medicine. And this was the first time where somebody sat me down and said, where do you want to be a year or 2 years from now? And how do we think about getting there? So that was an approach that I really learned a lot from. She was a reviewer for many, many granting agencies, and she taught me, she would give me the grants and ask me to review them. It was hard work, because coming from a medical background and now reviewing grants that were to do with basic biology was hugely challenging. My first grant took me 1 week of reading around the grant to think about being able to come up with a review that was sensible, because these were grants that were coming from the best people in the world. So that kind of approach, she could review the grant, what I spent 1 week on, she could do in 2 hours. But nonetheless, it was a great learning experience for me. I had the choice then to stay in the UK or US and come back to India. And I decided that I was going to come back because I wanted to do things that made a difference here. So when I got back, my collaborator was going to be Professor Jayaprakash Mulyal. He's been in the news a lot because he's been interviewed a lot for COVID-19. He is the most incredible epidemiologist and one of the most sensible people that I know of in science today. And I worked with him, but again, he was busy, so I had to spend a fair amount of time setting up the field site and making sure that I could build a program that could get data from the field, samples from the field into the laboratory, so that we could make sensible interpretations of the work that we were doing on diarrhea. And for that, the environment was really important. So from JP, I learned that if something is not biologically plausible, don't accept it. You have to figure out the mechanisms by which you get the results that you get. And in addition to JP, Dr. Honorine Ward has been a collaborator now for over 20 years. And she is one of the most generous people I know. And she has mentored lots and lots of people in Tufts University. I was very fortunate to connect with her because she taught me how to write really high quality grants. And without that kind of partnership, the collaboration, the work that we've done together, I don't think I would have been able to attract the funding that allowed us to do the kind of work that we do. So even though these were not formal mentoring relationships, I really learned a lot from them. But I have to tell you that one of the things that I think is most important is thinking about reverse mentoring. The world is changing a lot. Technologies are changing. The way we approach problems is changing. If you don't learn from your students, then you are very rapidly going to be left behind. Shown here is Sashireka Ramani. She was my first PhD student. She's an assistant professor at the Baylor College of Medicine. Dr. Jacob John, the younger Jacob John, is a student of Dr. J.P. Mullian, and he worked with me initially, and now on some projects I work with him. So I think the idea of reverse mentoring, of learning from young people, is something that we need to make sure becomes a part of our lives. There have been a host of young people who have taught me and continue to teach me that I need to approach problems in a completely different way from how I think it should be done. So, just to end, mentoring is absolutely a privilege. But I think for us to create the kinds of science that we want, that solves ambitious problems, it's also a necessity that we grow together to be able to build capacity in India. So with that, I'll stop and thank you for your attention.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. It's been a very interesting lecture. And seriously, the points that you raised in the lecture about the difference between mentoring and coaching, especially, these are very minute differences which people they mistake for each other. And especially the role of mentors and the role of mentees individually, the stages of the relationship that you mentioned, and your opinion on the gender issues for females, and provided that they get the if they get the right mentorship, they can do wonders. That thing that was really awesome, ma'am. And especially the emphasis that you laid on the extracurricular activities that we learn not only from the curriculum but also from the extracurricular aspects. And lastly, reverse mentoring that we tend to ignore. Like once we are mentors, we think, okay, we know we can guide the student. So I think this is a very learning experience for us as well as the participants who are listening to you, ma'am. So we have a few questions from the participants, which are very interesting. Uh, some of them are very interesting. So I'll just pick up a few questions. One of them is Andrilla Sain from Bengal, and she's asking how to tackle gender stereotypes in the relationship of mentor and mentee. Ma'am, if you could please.
So I think in the kind of social construct that we have today, it can be quite difficult for every man and every woman to overcome that kind of construct. But if you look at
Yes,
it,
ma'am.
there are enlightened men and women. So sometimes it's not just about men being unable to understand women. It's about older women saying, I put up with all of these problems and I survived and I managed, and you should too.
You
But
should.
that's not how
Yes.
you create a new world. That's not how you create a new environment. Some people are really stuck in their ways, and that can be either a man or a woman.
You're a woman.
If that is the case, I think the most important thing to do is to identify the right mentor. I mentioned personality clashes. If
Personality.
you have the wrong kind of mentor, it's going to hold you back. It's not going to be lifting you up. So, what you're looking for is somebody who will encourage you, somebody who will support you, and it's worth it.
Yes,
Really,
ma'am.
if I look back at my career, I think if I had had a mentor 20 years ago, I think I would have moved faster. So I
Yes,
got
ma'am.
a lot of support from people, but I didn't have a mentoring relationship.
Formal
So
mentor.
now what I'm trying to do is I make sure that I am mentoring formally my group
Yes, ma'am.
and people from other groups. So, for example, I'm mentoring a nephrologist. This has nothing to do with the area that I work in. But I think, in terms of a career path, I can help her out.
Okay, so what a wonderful talk, ma'am. I totally enjoyed your presentation, especially about this one, the active listening, and you have recited some of the personal vignettes from your childhood days. That is really wonderful. I totally enjoyed your talk. Absolutely awesome. Let me also pick up one question from the audience. It's Mahesh is asking from Kolkata. Depression is getting very common among PhD students, especially due to peer pressure to publish or perish in the world, plus various family pressures, especially for female students to get married. How would you advise young faculties in India to deal with such mental health issues of the PhD students?
That is
I
very
think one
interesting
of the
question.
things that we have to realize is that awareness of mental health is critically important. So the stress that young people have to deal with today is incredible. And it is not that, you know, things have changed very much. It's that we live in a very different kind of society now, where you're expected to carry a lot of burden that was not required earlier. And you're doing it without support systems that were previously available. However, there are a lot of counseling facilities that are available. So, for example, in Delhi, there is a group called Manas that is available for anybody who needs support. Many institutions are now offering counseling support that are arranging conversations for people who need it. The problem lies frequently not only in thinking there isn't a problem, thinking that if there is a problem, you should be able to sort it out yourself. It's a sign of weakness to feel stressed, to not be able to handle it, to be depressed. But depression is an illness. It is a clinically recognized illness. It can have endogenous causes. It can be something that comes from within. It can have exogenous causes. Maybe in your career, you've taken a lot of different kinds of hits, right? And that leads to you being depressed. Now, no matter what the cause of depression is, it is an illness and it requires treatment. If you had a broken leg, you would get it fixed. Why would you not want people to fix what is effectively a broken mind or a bruised mind? You have to make sure that people get the support and care they need. And the only way we can do it is by making sure that we are talking about it and making people aware that this is an illness. I think that is really important, and it needs to happen at all levels. It is not just about students and young faculty, it's about everybody in the academic or science environment.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, the next question is from Pallavi Gulati, and she's asking how to tackle a situation where the belief systems of the mentor and the mentee regarding certain phenomena do not match.
That is really challenging. So I think if you
Challenging.
think about it in your family, you will have people also whose belief systems don't match yours.
Yeah,
Will be views towards
true,
certain
ma'am.
classes of society, to entire genders, so it will happen. The question between
Yes,
a
ma'am.
mentor and a mentee is, can you put aside personal beliefs and focus on the goals that you want out of the mentoring relationship? If you can have an agreement that is not going to lead to conflict,
Hmm.
then you can make it work. But it has to be an active agreement that says that we have agreed to disagree on certain issues. And if those
Correct.
issues do not impact professional development, then it is feasible. If they do impact your arrangement, then don't go there.
Hmm.
Hi.
True, ma'am.
We have one question from Anjali. Pune is asking. She's asking, one reason why mentoring is not popular here in India is because many people consider it as a Western concept. Here, the education is teacher-centric. What are the measures to overcome this barrier to promote the concept that the role of teacher must be a facilitator of knowledge discovery?
So I think Anjali has it absolutely right. What is the idea of learning? It is that you must acquire not just knowledge, which is facts, but a way of thinking. Now, if the role is teacher centric, that is the delivery of information. Delivery of information in this day and age is an outmoded concept. You can go to the internet and find out pretty much everything that you need. What you need is a way of thinking, a way of learning, evolving ways that allow you to not only get information, but critique that information. A lot of what you find on the internet is not necessarily true. So you need to be able to critique, you need to be able to synthesize, and the only way that that happens is if it is a learner-centered view instead of a teacher-centered view. Once it becomes a learner-centered view, and this is something that does not fit in the constraints of the education system that we have at currently school level or at college level. But when you think about moving beyond college level to a postgraduate or a PhD program, here is where you need to be an active participant in the learning. So if you wind up with a PhD guide, for example, who tells you this is your project and these are the experiments that you're going to be doing, then that's not a PhD. What are you acquiring this degree for? It's a doctor of not science, it's a doctor of philosophy. The philosophy is the philosophy of learning. So if you are not the center of your PhD program, you are not making the calls about what you need to be doing, then you're really not fulfilling the goals that you embarked on this program with. It's challenging. It's very, very challenging because we've grown up in this system where it is literally regurgitate the knowledge that you were provided. That is a mark of performance. So we do that all the way through school, we do that all the way through college, and then you come to a PhD and say, now become an independent thinker. That doesn't happen very easily. So if we are to make that shift, then we really need to be thinking about what can we do that enables us to allow and support young people to learn to think creatively, to critique, to synthesize.
Ma'am, the next question is on a similar line, and that is asked by Akanksha Sharma. And she's saying, how can we grow and make more interesting relationships with other experts in our field when our own supervisor is not that much open in making new collaborations or to do new science? I think
I think I
I
can.
think some of the scholars they do face such challenges, and especially in Indian context, it's very important that if you could throw some light on it.
Yeah. So one way of approaching this is really to do a good review of the area in which you're working. What does the landscape look like? Which part of this landscape does your supervisor's work fit in? What are the other areas that you're interested in? Who are the leaders or the interesting thinkers in that field?
In that,
If you write to people who are very, very busy, some people are the types who, if it is an interesting question, will respond. So then you can start to think about what is happening. You can communicate with them. You can think about the approaches that they are using and whether that might be something that you could suggest to your supervisor. It's possible that that might not work. But if it doesn't work, that doesn't mean that that is the end of the world. Remember that your PhD is one step in your scientific journey. If you are constantly exploring the field that you're working in and related fields, you may not be doing the experiments, but you are still learning. You are still bringing together a bigger picture than your supervisor currently has. And this will stand you in good stead in the future.
Okay, so here today in our panel, we also have Professor Alok Dhawan. He is also an Academy Fellow and the Director of CSIR Indian Institute of Toxicology Research from Lucknow. Over to you, sir. I think you have a question to ask.
Yeah, good afternoon, ma'am. Fantastic talk. I think I just wanted to take you on this issue of when you do your master's and perhaps PhD, that's when you start thinking independently. I just want to share an experiment with you we did with students from class 9th onwards, and we brought them over to our institute for 2 months in summer. This year it was not possible, but prior to this. And we found that they are very, very receptive. If you bring them in, they give you very novel ideas and they actually do work for 2 months in our institute. So almost between 15 to 18 students get a chance to come and work here. Before that, we run a program which is called Be a Scientist for a Day, and they come and evaluate the entire institute, what they are doing. And out of those 200 odd students, we get proposals from about 20, 25, we evaluate them and we allow them to work. The other thing that I was able to do in a sort of higher education institution in Ahmedabad was upfront from undergrad. Everybody had to do some kind of research or the other. They had to present a paper, and by the time there were 30 undergrad students or the ones who came in parallelly in MSc first year, each of them, when they graduated, they had a publication before they graduated in the first authorship in an international journal. So I think it's just how much you are able to push these students. They have enormous potential. The fact that we go into rote learning right from the very beginning, I don't think it's a good idea. We need to allow them to do critical thinking, as you rightly mentioned, allow them to critique what is there and see what new can be done. There's enormous scope. Of course, one thing I must share here on this platform, language is a major barrier, which I felt that people from the backgrounds who cannot speak English language or can't sort of express themselves well get left out. That's a different story altogether. But I think the education system needs to improvise and see how we can include these people at a very early stage, as early as possible. And I mean, I can see teachers now coming from school in Lucknow to us during summer vacation. They're saying that, can we also do some research from school? They're coming to us not to do research. So I think that's a phenomenal change that we've been able to accomplish in Lucknow itself.
Absolutely, Dr. Dhawan. Those sound like really wonderful initiatives. And I hope that they will be adopted by many other places as well. In terms of the vernacular education, there has been a push to make sure that science communication in multiple languages is something that is promoted nationwide. So Hindi, of course, is the easiest to do, but whether it's Bengali or Tamil or any other language in the country, especially for students, we should be thinking about engaging them to make sure that there is communication in multiple languages.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So we have now a question from Aurelius from Imphal. The question is that one major hurdle in conversation between mentor-mentee is cognitive biases, like confirmation bias. How to break the ice? How to make mentee more receptive of the ideas?
I think this is where having that initial discussion in the 4 stages of mentorship, building that relationship and then goal setting. If you understand why you have set the goals that you have with the timelines that are associated with them, that will allow you to frame the discussions that you have much better. That way you also have a system that you can track, and if it starts to drift, then that becomes less of a problem. If you recognize when you're going off the rails because of different kinds of biases. Communication bias usually is not a problem in mentor-mentee relationships. It's usually the other way around, where the mentor winds up feeling like the mentee hasn't really performed at the level that they would like. And then there's a push on the mentor to do better.
Okay. Over to Punita.
Yes, ma'am. One of our participants, Kiran Mishra, she has a very interesting question. Like, what is the aspect that one should focus on in mentoring relationship? And can a person have both a personal as well as a professional mentor? This is
The first things that you need to think about is respect and trust.
mm,
So if you respect, it has to go both ways. If you have a mentor that you don't respect and trust, then you're not going to be able to build a good relationship, whether it's personal or professional.
or professional.
Similarly, if the mentor does not respect the mentee, does not see a clear pathway for the mentee to grow, and does not trust that the mentee will do the best they can to ensure that their career grows in the right way, that they try to be the right kind of person. It works both ways. You need respect and trust. Then the responsibility of the mentor becomes encouragement, support, and if possible, inspiration. Because if the mentor is somebody that you respect and trust, they are encouraging you, they are supporting you, you're going to feel like $1,000,000, right? You're going to feel like you can achieve things. That's where you want to get to with a mentor-mentee relationship. So it can be quite challenging, but the idea, it isn't that hard. I have seen it in many places, and many of the science academies have built mentoring programs. For example, the Academy of Medical Sciences in the UK has an amazing mentoring program. They went deliberately and they said, we will build this. We will tell seniors in the ecosystem that this is their responsibility. They have to support younger people. And it's been a real success. Now they're thinking about multiplying it in other places as well. So it can be done. There has to be a commitment to do it.
That is true.
Okay, so let me pick up one more question. It's from Shakti Vel from Coimbatore is asking, how mentoring has changed post-COVID-19 period? Interaction with PhD students are mostly online. Are there any major disadvantages in this mode? Yes.
If anything, I would think that one, mentees need more support at this time. So whether that is mental stress because you can't, because of the prevailing situation, because you're not getting experiments done, because you don't know what the future holds, there is a huge amount of increased stress on trainees, on mentees. And therefore, I think it's very important for mentors to make sure that they make time for their trainees. And perhaps if work is less, I hope the more responsible guides and mentors will do this. Now, again, remember that in our construct, we seem to think that the mentor is the guide or the PhD guide. That is not necessarily the case. The mentor may be someone outside your own structure that has made a commitment to support your professional growth. It may be a guide for, it may or may not be your doctoral advisory committee, maybe somebody in another department. But the idea is to help your career growth as much as possible, to support you as a professional and also as a person.
Okay. Ma'am, there is a very important question by Anup Kumar from UP, and he's saying, what will you do when a mentee comes up with an idea and a project in which you are not an expert? This is more, I think, in terms of PhD and supervisor.
So I think in that case, a mentor does not need to be an expert in everything. That's impossible.
Everything.
What is it that you
Yes.
will do? You will try and help them find the best support they can. You will try and get the project evaluated by people who are experts in the field. You will reach out to your network and make sure that your mentee gets the support that they need.
Guidance. That's true.
Okay, so we have a question here from Priya from Rajasthan is asking, would you recommend considering mentees as a family member? How appropriate it is to invite them for dinner and family functions?
So strictly speaking, this is intended to be a professional relationship. So if you do think about personal support, but as you know, in PhD groups, for example, some PhD guides are very happy treating their students and their group as extended family. Others are not. So it really is a question of not just the professional, but the personal relationship that you build up. And you need to play it by ear. Basically, as long as the goals of encouragement, support, career growth are met, the others are nice add-ons. Maybe you're making a friend. It's supposed to be time limited, but you may have a relationship that you will appreciate for the rest of your life. There is nothing stopping that from happening.
Okay. Ma'am, on this line, one of our participants, Bandhan Goyal, he has asked, what differentiates between a formal and an informal mentorship? And what are the various types of starting point for a formal mentorship?
So a formal
That
mentor.
is more in continuation to a previous question.
So a formal mentoring relationship is when you actually sit down. So you can make a chart, right? And many places that have formal mentoring programs will do that. They will tell you this person is assigned to this person, or these are the 3 students that will be mentored by this professor in this other department. You may have a professor of history who is mentoring PhD students in biology or physics, right? You will then set up a relationship where you say, we will meet once a month and we will have a discussion at coffee or something like that for X period of time, that we will do a longer check-in every 3 months. We will define the goals at this meeting. We will check progress on how we are doing every so often. That is a formal mentoring relationship. An informal relationship would be, well, I've agreed to mentor you. Please, let's have a couple of meetings. Let's get to know each other. And then we can have a discussion about what it is you want to do. And over time, you let me know when you need me for something. And whenever you need me, send me an email and we can talk. So that becomes more informal mentoring, whereas with a structure is more formal mentoring.
Okay, so we have a question by N. Iyengar. He's asking, what is the difference?
Sorry, Felix, you froze.
Yeah, I think I got, yeah. So the question is from Iyengar. Iyengar is asking, what is the difference between mentoring and proctoring?
So proctoring is supervision at a different level. Mentoring is a support structure.
Dr. Punita, would you like to ask one question? We can have, I think session is getting
Yeah,
over. It's already offshored, but again, maybe
over,
last
yeah.
questions.
Yeah, just I think it could be the last question. Anusuya Nagraj, she's asking how to overcome reverse mentoring problems, if any. I think it's a good question that she has asked.
Yeah. So the idea of reverse mentoring is a fairly recent one, but I think it is very important. The problems will come when, if it becomes a requirement and if the mentor does not have an open mind, right? So if you're looking at reverse mentoring where the mentor gets mentored, if they are the kind of person that thinks, I have a lot of experience, I know everything, who are these young punks to teach me anything, right? Then you're going to wind up with problems. I think what you need to accept is that the world has changed, and it is young people who have been brought up in a digital world that will know much more about how to navigate this world than we will. Whether that is access to information, whether that is ways of communication, they are likely to know way more than we do. And we have a lot to learn.
Yes.
Look at it this
Okay.
way. Don't we
Okay, so
in some ways our grandparents knew less than us? So, my first thesis was
Now we think.
typewritten, right?
Okay, ma'am.
That was that long ago.
That long.
right,
Yes,
I
ma'am.
have, yes, I have a question from Abhishek Chattar, and he's asking, while choosing for the PhD and postdoc, what are the factors or parameters should one look in a mentor? Should we go for a rating system for the PhD supervisor as a good mentor, like apps rating the doctors?
So I think a lot depends. A mentor-mentee relationship is a very, very personal one. So some people are truly outstanding mentors, and you will see from the way they are that not only will their own group be one where many people go on to do well, they will also have provided support to many people outside their own group. Now, how do you set up a ranking system to do that? I think this is where I need reverse mentoring.
Okay.
Over to Dr. Punita.
Okay.
Let us conclude the session now.
I think we are done with the questions, and I'm sure the participants would be, very delighted with the answers they have got to their problems. And ma'am, personally, I could relate to your lecture to some extent. Like you said, you have been at so many places. Same was with me. My father, he was in a transferable job. We used to keep changing schools every 2-3 years. So I can understand. And on similar lines, like my father, he has been my first mentor, and he continues to do so. Guiding star so far. I thank you, ma'am, immensely. It's from the core of my heart. And I'd say, ma'am, it's been a wonderful lecture. We have learned a lot about mentoring today, and somehow we take it lightly. Okay, I'm your supervisor, I'm your mentor. But the minor differences between a supervisor, mentor, or a personal or a professional mentor, all these things we have learned a lot today. So, thank you so much, ma'am. And I would like to thank the audiences also who are with us, watching us live on YouTube. Over to Felix, sir.
Ma'am, thank you so much. And would you like to give one take-home message to, because our audience of 17,000 counting audiences are there, And these audience are majority are young faculties. Of course, they will be mentoring soon. So if you have one message to relay on our audience, so yeah, please.
Sure. So first, I'd like to start by saying, Punita, you're very lucky to have a father who supported you the way yours did. And I think being in transferable jobs gives you resilience, which is going to stand you in really good stead for everything that you do in the future. So as a message to everybody, I think it's easy to say dream big and be ambitious, but we have daily lives to live that can sometimes make that quite a challenge. But I think the one thing that I would advise everybody to do is to really, you know, that sometimes it's not possible for us to solve these really big problems, but it is possible for us to be aware of what the big picture is. So whatever area we work in, make sure that you are framing the problem that you are working in. It may be a small part of the picture, but make sure that you have an awareness of where the entire field is going. That way, when opportunities open up, you will be ready. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It's wonderful to have you here, and we are really humbled, and especially it's really at the grassroots level. Yes, so without any problem, you volunteered us, to give. You already spent almost one hour, more than almost 1.5 hours you spent with us. Thank you so much from bottom of our heart. Goodbye and have a nice day, ma'am. Coming to the next talk. Yes. Coming to the next talk, I would like to allow me to share my screen, and it's by Dr. Subha Priyadarshini, and she is the editor-in-chief of the Springer Nature, and she is the first speaker in the Young Science Leaders series, and join us at 5:30 p.m. today. So we just have an hour, so just please enjoy the cup of tea or coffee, and I will see you all exactly at 5:30 p.m. to hear her story. Goodbye all.
Goodbye.